It started on a quiet morning. The kind where sunlight touches your face before your eyes open and you smile without knowing why. She was standing in the small kitchen, barefoot on cold tiles, humming a song she used to love in high school. A half-finished pancake sizzled in the pan. The air smelled like syrup and butter, and for a moment, she felt like she belonged. He was in the other room, laughing at something on his phone. She could hear it. That laugh she had fallen for. The deep one, the one that used to make her knees go soft. She touched her stomach without thinking, just a brush of her fingers over the fabric of her old t-shirt. The baby was barely a whisper inside her, but she already spoke to it in her thoughts. "We're going to be okay. He's going to love you. He already does." She didn't say it out loud. She was too scared she might jinx it. The table was set for two. She even folded the napkins, like her mama used to do on Sundays, back before everything fell apart. She wanted this new family to be different. She needed it to be different. He came in, phone still in hand, didn't look up, just grabbed his coffee. She tried to catch his eye, but he blinked past her. "Do you want?" she started, voice soft. "I'm late," he cut in. "We'll talk later." His lips brushed her cheek, more air than kiss. The door shut too hard. The plate of pancakes sagged, steam curling into a question mark. She stood there, one hand on her belly, one hand still holding a fork. In the silence, a little voice in her head whispered what her mouth couldn't. "Something's not right." She stared at the door for a long time, like it might open again. It didn't. The syrup cooled, the light shifted, and the room felt too big for just her and a baby no one else had asked about yet. It happened on a Tuesday. Not a loud, dramatic kind of day. Just an ordinary, cloudy afternoon with soft rain tapping on the windows like someone trying not to be heard. She had just gotten home. Groceries in one hand, keys in the other. Her shoulders were wet, her hair clung to her neck, and still she smiled because she had picked up his favorite cereal. The little things still mattered to her. But the apartment was too still. No TV hum, no shoes by the door, no jacket on the hook. She walked in slow. Something cold slid under her ribs. There were drawers half open, the closet door gaped wide, empty hangers swayed like ghosts. His cologne, the one that used to cling to her skin, was gone. On the kitchen counter, beneath the crooked magnet they bought on their first trip, was a folded note. Her fingers shook when she reached for it. 2 lines. "I can't do this. Don't call me." No name, no apology, no fight, just silence wearing his handwriting. She stood there in the middle of the room, her breath caught in her chest. She looked around like maybe there was a camera, a joke, something she missed. But all she saw was absence. His favorite mug was still in the sink. His laugh still echoed faintly in the walls, but only because her heart hadn't caught up yet. She sat on the edge of their bed, now her bed, and stared at the floor. One hand rested on her belly. The baby kicked for the first time. She didn't smile. Her mouth moved like she might say something, but no words came out. Tears didn't fall. Not yet. There was a kind of pain too deep for crying, the kind that makes your face freeze, that turns you into stone before you even understand what's happening. And outside, the rain just kept tapping. Steady, cold, like the sky knew and couldn't help either. Nights were the worst, not because of the cold, though the apartment barely held heat anymore. The radiator groaned like it was tired too, coughing out half-warm air that never reached her feet. She lay on the second-hand couch, curled on her side. One pillow under her head, one between her knees. The baby shifted inside her. Heavier now. Breathing took effort. Turning over felt like dragging herself across water. But it wasn't the heaviness of her body that kept her awake. It was the silence. The kind that presses against your ears and whispers everything you try not to think about. She stared at the ceiling. Cracks formed little rivers above her. She used to trace them with her eyes and pretend they were maps, to better places, kinder futures. Now they just looked like broken things. Her phone was face down on the floor beside her. No calls, no messages. Not from him. Not from anyone, really. She could hear the neighbors laughing through the walls. Someone's TV was on, a sitcom, laughter on cue. So loud, so distant, she hadn't laughed in weeks. She couldn't even remember what her own voice sounded like when it was happy. She pulled the blanket higher, even though it didn't reach past her knees. One hand rested on her belly again, always there, like she was trying to protect what little she had left. And in the dark, sometimes she whispered to the baby, "I'm here. I don't know how, but I'm still here." She didn't know if the baby could hear, but saying it out loud made her feel like maybe she wasn't invisible. The window moaned with wind. A branch scraped the glass. She closed her eyes. Not to sleep, just to disappear for a while. And as the night pressed on, the only thing that filled the room was her breath. Slow, fragile, and still holding on. It started with a cramp, low, sharp, and sudden. She had felt pains before, but this one made her stop mid-step. She gripped the edge of the bathroom sink, eyes wide, trying not to panic. The shelter was almost empty. It was late, past curfew, lights dimmed, voices hushed behind heavy doors. Only a single bulb flickered above the mirror, casting yellow light on her tired face. She looked at herself. Skin pale, lips dry, hair tied up with an old shoelace. And in her eyes, fear. The kind that fills you so completely you forget how to breathe. Another pain came, deeper, longer. She sank to her knees. She tried to call out, but her voice cracked. No one answered. Her breath turned short and shallow. She wrapped her arms around her belly, rocking slightly on the cold tile floor. Her water broke, just like that. A sudden warmth, then cold, then panic. She whimpered, a sound barely more than a whisper. No one came. So she bit her sleeve and let her body do what it had to do. Time blurred. Minutes melted into hours. She clenched her teeth, pressed her back against the wall, her knees pulled up, her hands trembling. Tears ran down her cheeks, not just from pain, but from the aloneness, the kind of alone that echoes in your bones. And then, a scream. Not loud, not full, just hers. Raw, crooked, human, followed by silence, then a sound, a small wet cry, a beginning. She looked down, hands shaking. The baby was slippery, tiny, crying, alive. She wrapped the baby in her jacket, held them close. Her breath broke into sobs now, silent sobs, the kind you bury for too long until they claw their way out. She pressed her forehead to the baby's. She was still on the floor, still cold, still alone, but in her arms was warmth, weight, life. The bathroom light buzzed above them, and in that dim little room surrounded by nothing, she whispered, "I got you, I got you." And for the first time in days, maybe weeks, maybe months, her eyes closed, and she felt something like peace, even as the blood soaked through her jeans. The nurse had kind eyes, older, with soft hands and a voice like worn cotton. She didn't ask too many questions, just gently took the baby from her arms and wrapped them in something clean. They were in a hospital now. White walls, quiet beeping, everything smelled like bleach and bandages. She lay in the bed, pale, hair matted, lips cracked. Her body felt hollowed out, like something sacred had been pulled from inside her, and she hadn't quite closed up yet. But when they placed the baby back in her arms, tiny, swaddled, warm, something in her lit up. He didn't look like her. Not exactly. He had her lips, though, and his little hand, it curled around her finger like he already knew her pain and was holding it for her. She stared at him for a long time, no phone to take pictures. No family in the waiting room, no flowers or cards, just her and him and the hush between them. The baby blinked slowly in his sleep, mouth twitching at some dream she'd never see. She pressed her lips to his forehead. His skin smelled like powder, milk, and something indescribably new. Tears filled her eyes again, but they were different now. Not jagged, not the kind that drown you. These ones came like rain after a long, bitter drought. Slow, healing. "I don't have much," she whispered, "but I have you, and I'll fight for you. Every single day." Her thumb brushed his cheek. She didn't know how they'd eat, where they'd sleep, or if tomorrow would be worse than today. But she had carried him through storms, bled for him, broke for him, and still, she was here, holding him. She closed her eyes, his weight pressed into her chest, and for a moment she felt anchored. Not floating, not drowning, just present. And as the machines beeped and the lights dimmed around them, she held on to the only thing left in her world that was real and warm, and whispered again, "We've got this, baby, you and me." It wasn't even the hunger that hurt most. Not really. It was the standing, the waiting, the being looked at and unseen all at once. The food pantry line curled around the side of the church. Cold wind whipped at her coat, the thin one she'd found in the shelter's lost and found bin. It didn't zip anymore, and she held it closed with one hand while the other cradled her baby to her chest. He was wrapped in 3 layers: hospital blanket, donated hoodie, and her scarf. Still, his cheeks were pink from the chill. She rocked on her feet, trying to keep his cries down. The woman behind her clicked her tongue. The man in front of her looked over his shoulder once, then turned away again. She kept her eyes on the sidewalk. Cracks and gum spots. She counted them to keep from crying. 7 more to the steps, 5 to the door. Just keep breathing. Her stomach growled, sharp and hollow, like it had given up asking. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. Most of what she got, she gave to her son. He couldn't understand why there wasn't more. He only knew his body ached for milk, warmth, something. A volunteer opened the door. "Next," he called. She stepped forward. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Long tables held cans, boxes, bread in plastic bags. The woman at the counter didn't smile, just glanced at her paper ID, then at the baby in her arms. "Formula?" the woman asked. She nodded, grateful. A small can was slid across the table. She reached out slowly. Her hands trembled. The woman hesitated, then added a jar of baby food. "God bless," she said, but her voice was already gone before the words landed. She wanted to say thank you, but her throat was too tight. As she turned to leave, her baby started to cry again. A high, thin wail, and suddenly, every head in the room turned. Not with empathy, not with kindness. Just annoyance, pity, judgment. She froze, her cheeks burned. For a second she wanted to run, out into the cold, away from the stairs, away from the reality that she, who once believed in love and dreams and breakfast tables, was now this. But she didn't run. She kissed her son's head, held him closer, and walked out slowly, one foot after the other. On the sidewalk again, she looked up at the sky, blank, gray, wide. She whispered something. Not even she knew what it meant, but it tasted like hope, even if it hurt. The building smelled like lemon cleaner and old carpet. Not unpleasant, just tired. Like everything here had been wiped down too many times and still couldn't forget where it came from. She pushed the mop bucket down the hallway. Its plastic wheels squeaked, echoing off the marble walls. The floors were slick with her effort. The kind of shine no one notices, unless it's missing. She wore a janitor's jumpsuit 2 sizes too big, sleeves rolled to the elbow. Her baby, now a few months old, stayed with the older woman in room 2B, a retired nurse who charged nothing, just smiled and said, "I've held babies through worse." Every shift started at dusk. By the time most people were going home, she was just clocking in. 8 floors, 12 bathrooms, 4 office suites. The work wasn't noble. It was sweat. It was muscle. It was sometimes a cut on her hand she didn't feel until hours later. But it was hers. She worked in silence, always listening. To the way people spoke when they didn't know she was there. To the buzz of strategy meetings through glass walls. To the words they wrote on whiteboards. Scale, capital, growth, exit. Foreign at first, but she wrote them down in a little notebook she kept in her back pocket. Late at night, when her baby slept beside her on a thrifted mattress, she'd Google them on a cracked phone, just to know. One evening, while wiping fingerprints off the corner office glass, she found a magazine left open on a chair. It was a feature on women founders. Brown faces, braided hair, boardrooms. She stared at it for a long time. Something fluttered in her chest. Not envy. Not quite. More like a question she wasn't ready to ask out loud. She folded the page gently, slipped it into her pocket next to her notebook. That night, she mopped with more intention. Like she wasn't just cleaning the floor, she was mapping it. Learning the corners. Watching the way power moved, mop in one hand, dream in the other. And somewhere beneath the exhaustion, something in her whispered, "You don't belong here forever." Some people thought cleaners were invisible, and maybe she was, to most. But invisibility had its own power. No one filtered their words around her. No one noticed what she noticed. She started bringing a second notebook. The first was full, business terms, names, even company slogans she'd memorized. The new one was for patterns. Routines, people. Mr. Levinson in accounting always left his computer unlocked. The marketing director paced when she was lying and always twirled a pen before pitching bad ideas. The CEO used the phrase, "Let me circle back," when he didn't actually care. She moved quietly, cleaned quickly, then stayed a little longer near open doors and conference calls. She listened. Always. She learned how budgets were built, how teams crumbled. How one good idea could make a room fall silent. At home, with her baby curled against her chest, she'd replay it all in her mind. Sometimes she scribbled on the backs of bills, napkins, whatever she could find. Always speak last in a meeting. People invest in confidence, not perfection. It was slow, messy, but it was building something in her. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. One evening, while wiping down a row of chairs, she passed a half-open laptop. A slide deck glowed on the screen. It was a pitch, numbers, charts, potential revenue. She couldn't stop staring, not at the colors or the graphs, but at the way it felt like a language she was starting to understand. A man walked in behind her, and she jumped, heart racing. He laughed, easy and tired. "Don't worry," he said, loosening his tie. "You're not the first one to study my pitch. Hell, you might be the only one who actually cares." She smiled faintly, unsure what to say. He didn't wait, just sat, pulled out his phone, but her mind kept turning. She had nothing, no degree, no contacts. But she had this fire in her, fed by copy paper, overheard meetings, and stolen glances at ideas bigger than the mop she pushed. She knew it now, in her bones. She was watching because she was meant to do more than clean. She was learning because one day she wouldn't be standing outside the glass. It was a Thursday night, almost 10 p.m. The building was nearly empty, just the hum of distant elevators and the click of her mop across the polished floor. She was on the 12th office that shift, her back sore, eyes heavy. But she paused, like she always did at the bookshelf in the corner office. Every night she cleaned in here, she ran her fingers across the book spines, leadership, branding, startup memoirs with glossy covers. She had never bought a book that wasn't secondhand. She had never belonged in a room like this. But still, she read the titles out loud in her head, quietly, like spells, like blueprints. One book was left open on the desk, Scaling Up Smart. She leaned in and skimmed a page. Her eyes traced every word, her lips silently moving with them. Behind her, a voice broke the air. "You're the first person I've seen actually read that." She froze. Her heart skipped. She turned slowly. It was a woman, mid-40s, confident, elegant in a navy pantsuit. Her hair was braided close to her scalp. Her shoes clicked softly on the floor. "I didn't mean to." She started, eyes wide, hands curling into her shirt. But the woman lifted a hand gently. "It's fine, truly." There was no judgment in her voice, just curiosity, and something warmer. They stood in that quiet office for a beat too long. "What's your name?" the woman asked. She hesitated. "Naomi," she said softly. "Well, Naomi," the woman smiled. "How long have you been teaching yourself?" Naomi blinked. I just listen, read things. I don't know what I'm doing, really." The woman tilted her head. "Yes, you do. You're paying attention. That's more than half of it." She reached into her bag, pulled out a business card, and held it out. "Come to this workshop next Saturday. It's small, it's free, it's for women like us who've had to fight a little harder. You'll fit right in." Naomi stared at the card in her hand like it might vanish if she blinked. "Why?" she asked. The woman paused, her smile softened. "Because someone once saw me when I was mopping floors, and everything changed." She nodded once, turned, and walked out, heels tapping lightly down the corridor. Naomi stood there a long time after she was gone. Then she folded the card, tucked it into her pocket, next to her notebook, and looked back at the open book on the desk. And for the first time, she didn't feel like a thief in that room. She felt like she was meant to be there. The classroom was small, just a rented space above a community center. Folding chairs, chipped tables, and a whiteboard with faded stains that never fully erased. But to Naomi, it felt like walking into a new country. She sat near the back, arms tight across her notebook, afraid someone might ask why she was there, afraid someone might ask if she belonged. But no one did. Instead, they nodded at her, smiled softly. Women of all colors, all shapes, wearing thrifted blazers and carrying secondhand laptops. Some were young, some were grandmothers. All of them looked tired, but alive. Like maybe this class, this space, was their one crack of sunlight too. The woman from the office stood at the front, full of calm energy. "Today we talk about starting from where you are," she said. "Not where people expect you to be, not where you wish you were, just here, now." Naomi's pen shook as she scribbled every word. Terms like virtual services, online platforms, branding yourself. Things she'd heard through office walls, now unpacked in plain English. The first time she logged into an online freelancing site, her hands trembled. She didn't know how to price herself, didn't know what a proposal was, but she stayed up past midnight, baby sleeping beside her, and typed out her first offer for a data entry job. It paid barely enough for a bag of diapers. She got it anyway. Her first win. She cried into her hands when the money landed in her dusty PayPal account. It was only $12, but it came from her effort, her mind, her survival. Week by week, she took more jobs, entered invoices in quiet hours, answered emails during feedings. One client left a 5-star review. 2 more followed. She made enough to buy a refurbished laptop, enough to afford fresh fruit again, enough to take a taxi to class instead of walking 3 miles with her son bundled in her coat. No one clapped for her, no headlines, no cheers, but inside her, a quiet rising, like a tide. And one night, as she closed her laptop, kissed her son's forehead, and turned off the single lamp in the room, she whispered, "This is just the beginning." It was barely more than a storage room, 12 feet long, 10 feet wide, one flickering light overhead, a single window painted shut. But to Naomi, it felt like stepping into a new world. She stood just inside the door, holding her son on one hip and a ring of borrowed keys in her hand. The landlord had shrugged when he handed them over. "It's nothing fancy," he'd said. "But it's yours if the check clears." And it had. Her first office. She let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. There was no furniture yet, just cracked linoleum, a wall outlet, and a dream folded up inside her. She laid her son down gently on a blanket in the corner. He cooed, unaware of what this space meant. Then she got to work. A donated desk from a church group. 2 plastic chairs from a yard sale. A kettle for tea. She didn't drink it much, but it made the place feel grown up. She hung a small corkboard with handwritten goals. Hire 1 mom, land 2 clients, don't stop. It wasn't polished. The Wi-Fi was slow. The heater clicked like it had asthma. But when Naomi opened her laptop and typed her first email from that room, with her name at the bottom, not just as a freelancer, but as the founder of something real, she felt taller somehow. Like the years of being overlooked had added up to this one moment of being sure. Her business wasn't booming. She only had 1 part-time assistant, another single mom she'd met at the workshop. But the work was honest. The mission was clear. Help women like me find their way out. No fancy slogans, just truth. Some nights she stayed late, her son asleep in a makeshift crib, while she answered emails and watched online tutorials with tired eyes. She didn't complain. She had scrubbed bathrooms for people who never learned her name. Now she was building something with hers on the door. A quiet wind rattled the window as evening fell. She stood at that window, arms folded, watching the street below. Buses, headlights, strangers moving fast, and inside, for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full, like something had begun. The first time Naomi said the words, "I'll be reviewing your application," she had to swallow the lump in her throat before her voice cracked. The woman sitting across from her wore a dress 2 sizes too big and kept tugging at her sleeves. Her hands trembled as she answered questions. Naomi noticed, not because she was judging, but because she remembered. She saw herself in that chair. The old version. The one who used to shrink inside every room. Naomi smiled softly. "You've got more experience than you think," she said, and meant it. That woman became her second hire. By month 4, there were 5 of them, all women, all mothers, all tired but determined. They worked from laptops with cracked screens, sometimes balancing toddlers on their laps. They messaged late at night, finished deadlines between school pickups, answered client calls from borrowed Wi-Fi at public libraries. It was messy. It was magic. Naomi learned how to lead not from books, though she still read them, but from listening. She didn't give orders. She created space. She asked, "What do you need to thrive?" and meant it. 1 client turned into 3. 3 turned into 10. And suddenly companies started saying things like, "I heard about your team," or "Can you train others to do what you do?" She said yes, even when she was scared. Especially when she was scared. They moved into a new office, just 2 floors up from the first one, but with real chairs, a meeting table, and a printer that worked most of the time. She stood in that room one morning, watching her team laugh over lukewarm coffee, their babies babbling in the playpen tucked in the corner. It wasn't corporate, it wasn't sleek, but it was real. It was theirs. She looked at her reflection in the glass window. Same face, but something behind the eyes had shifted. Not harder, just steadier. The girl who used to mop floors now signed paychecks. The woman no one noticed now spoke in rooms where people took notes. And as her son played on the rug nearby, clapping to his own rhythm, Naomi whispered, not out loud, just inside, "We're not surviving anymore. We're building." It didn't hit her all at once. Not when she signed the papers. Not when the banker shook her hand. Not even when the lawyer said, "Congratulations, Miss James, it's officially yours." It hit her when she stood across the street, hands in her coat pockets, watching the building in the morning light. 6 stories of dull gray concrete. Same flickering lobby light, same security guard who used to barely glance at her badge when she came in at dusk, mop in hand. Now, the badge was gone. The guard stood up straighter when she walked in. He called her ma'am. She crossed the street slowly, her boots clicking on the pavement. In one hand, she held her son's small fingers. In the other, a folded piece of paper, the new lease agreement for the entire second floor. The directory near the front door had just been updated. She found her name. Simple. Clean. Naomi James, founder, Rise and Root Virtual Services. Her throat tightened. It wasn't about the name itself. It was what it had survived. The rain, the silence, the food pantry lines, the mop water and the bleeding, and the nights no one saw her cry. She looked down at her son. He tugged on her coat, pointing up at the tall windows. "Mommy's building," he said, and something inside her cracked wide open. Not from pain, but from proof. Proof that dreams didn't have to come wrapped in gold. Sometimes they showed up in concrete and light and fingerprints on glass doors. Inside, they'd already hung a plaque, small, bronze, nailed to the wall beside the entrance to her new office. It didn't say her name. It said his. "For Jordan, you gave me the reason. I built the rest." She reached out and touched the metal with her fingertips. Cool. Solid. Real. And in the quiet of that lobby, under the same buzzing lights she once cleaned beneath, Naomi let her shoulders fall, let her breath go, let herself belong. She almost didn't recognize him. It was the way he sat, hunched slightly forward, shoulders drawn in, like he was trying to take up less space. He looked thinner, older. The beard was gone. The charm, too. He was in the lobby, holding a folder in his lap, dressed in a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit, nervously adjusting his collar, glancing at his phone, then back at the elevator doors. Over and over. Naomi stepped off the elevator and paused. The air between them shifted, like something old had just entered the room. He looked up and froze. His mouth opened slightly, then shut again. She watched his eyes take her in, the tailored coat, the soft silk blouse, the quiet confidence in the way she held herself. He stood slowly. "Naomi?" Her name sounded strange coming from his mouth again, small, hesitant. She looked at him. Not with anger. Not even sadness, just clarity. "I have a 9 a.m., she said gently, her voice steady. "Can I help you with something?" He swallowed hard. The folder in his hand trembled. I applied for the facilities job, janitorial." He looked down. "Didn't realize this was your company." She nodded once. Silence wrapped around them like a heavy coat neither one wanted to wear. He looked at her again, eyes searching for something. Maybe forgiveness, maybe memory, maybe a version of her that still needed him. But she wasn't that girl anymore. "Follow me," she said softly. She led him through the hallway, past framed photos of her team, past a mural of words painted by single mothers who had rebuilt their lives here. He didn't speak, just followed. At the HR desk, she stopped. "This is Miss Rivera," Naomi said, motioning to her head of hiring. "She'll walk you through the next steps." She turned back to him, held his gaze. "You're in good hands," she said. "We believe in second chances here." And then, she smiled, not cruelly, not sweetly, just peacefully. Then she turned and walked away, and with every step it became clearer. She didn't need closure. She was the closure. The air inside the conference room was still. Late morning light spilled through the tall windows, soft and golden, washing over the polished table and the stack of interview folders waiting beside the coffee pot. Naomi stood just outside the door. She could hear him inside, clearing his throat, adjusting the chair. That same nervous rhythm in his movements from before. Only now, it was happening in her space, on her floor, with her name etched into the glass door behind him. She closed her eyes for a moment, not to gather courage. She already had that. But to feel the weight of it, everything she'd carried, everything she'd let go. She remembered the night she gave birth in silence, the times she skipped meals so her son wouldn't go without, the job interviews she'd walked to in shoes with holes, the way she used to rehearse confidence she didn't yet believe. And now, the man who had once vanished like she was disposable sat waiting for her to decide if he'd be let in. She opened the door. He looked up fast, eyes wide. He stood. "Naomi? I mean, Miss James." She raised a hand gently, cutting through the noise without saying a word. She crossed the room slowly, deliberately, her heels soft against the carpet, her presence steady, not cold, just unshakable. She sat across from him, opened the file, looked at it carefully, then finally looked at him. "You're here for the janitorial role," she said calmly. "Is that correct?" He nodded, lips parting like he wanted to say something, maybe explain, maybe apologize, but she didn't ask for either. She slid the paper back into the folder, closed it. "Miss Rivera will contact you by the end of the week with next steps," she said. "If you're hired, you'll report to our facilities coordinator on Monday mornings." Another pause. "Is that understood?" He swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." She nodded, stood. He did too, but slower, unsure of what to do with his hands, his eyes. Naomi offered a polite, distant smile, then turned and walked to the door. She didn't look back. Outside the room, she paused only once, to take a deep breath. It was quiet, no applause, no dramatic music, just her heart steady in her chest and the quiet realization she didn't rise to show him who she had become. She rose to become the woman she was always meant to be. That night, the office lights dimmed one by one, casting long shadows down the hallway. Outside the windows, the city pulsed softly, not loud, just alive. Naomi stood in the quiet, one hand resting on the back of her chair, the other holding a photo her son had drawn. A crayon sketch of a tall building with a stick figure woman at the top. Her hair was curly, her smile was big, she smiled too. The space was still, no clients calling, no contracts needing signatures, just her. And the hum of something she had built from nothing. Her son was asleep on the couch behind her, limbs sprawled, a superhero blanket tangled around him. She didn't need to say anything out loud. The silence knew. She walked to the window and looked out. Down below, people moved fast. Cars flickered past, streetlights blinked. She wondered if any of them knew her story. Probably not. But maybe, someday, they would. Not because she wanted fame, not for headlines or validation, but because stories like hers, the kind that start in forgotten corners and rise quietly, deserve to be seen. Her reflection in the glass stared back, older, wiser, still growing. And in the hush of that moment, her phone buzzed. A message. She glanced at the screen, then paused. A name she hadn't seen before. A company she didn't remember contacting. An offer that made her eyebrows lift. She read it twice, then again, and for a long, still moment, she didn't respond. She just stood there, calm, curious. A woman no longer chasing survival, but standing at the edge of something even bigger. And with the city breathing around her and her son dreaming behind her, Naomi whispered, "Maybe it's time." But time for what? That is a story for another night.